Welcome back to Lunge Logic. This is Devin,
This is Luke.
and today we have our first video episode. So for our audio listeners, if you have the time or the ability, please go check out this video episode. I think it'll be available on Spotify, probably YouTube too. But yeah, we're really excited to try this out. So let's see how it goes. Today, we are going to continue our episode where we left off about the social consequences of determinism.
And then you came up with whether if we can fail the purpose of the universe.
Right. So let's take a step back. So if the universe or if time is predetermined, right?
Yes.
Which is what the episode was about. We towards the end we kind of felt like, well, if that's the case, then the universe is destined to fulfill its purpose automatically. Like it's not really, you can't really do anything to change that, right? But then the more interesting idea that we started to think about is, what if things aren't predetermined, right? What if we have the ability to change what's going on? Then we also have the ability to accomplish or fail the purpose of the universe, right?
Well, I think I mentioned how I think the purpose of the universe might be more complex if everything were to be predictable. Because, well, say the universe is conscious, right?
Yeah.
Which we don't know, but let's just assume. If the universe is aware of its destination or its destiny, and if there is a purpose, which is another big assumption, but if there's a purpose, its purpose probably isn't, or it most definitely isn't, to observe what's going to happen because it's predictable. But I think it's more focused on the existence itself. Wouldn't you agree?
So it's just carrying out its existence.
I think that plays a bigger role in its purpose. Because if everything were to be predictable, then, right? It's not in the, what's going to happen. That's not the purpose. It's like the existence itself. And that itself that cannot be unachievable.
I mean, initially it sounds a little lackluster, right? Its entire purpose for being here is just to be here, right? But then when you think about the question of why is there anything at all, then you start to realize that does seem like a pretty significant purpose. But what if the purpose isn't significant, Like, I mean, as humans, we tend to think that the more purposeful something is, the more significant it is, right? But what if the universe isn't like that? What if it's just, sort of boring? Or at least to our standards,
Right.
I mean, that's possible,
Sure.
right? So let's talk a little bit more about failing the purpose.
What does that mean for us and for the universe?
Right. I mean, it's not like in our everyday lives we sort of, are pressured to fulfill a purpose, or at least not consciously, right? But maybe we are. Maybe we are, like subliminally, or maybe everything's connected and it's pushing us towards the purpose. I don't know. Those are two possibilities, but
Do you think that if there is a purpose, do you think it has to do with just the existence itself, or does it involve any consciousness, life, humans?
so you're saying that consciousness is a key part
So the purpose of the universe has some sort of conscious activity involved in it. So it has to involve life. It has to involve consciousness
Well,
and intelligent beings.
I mean yeah, because like consciousness is the primary factor for change in the universe, right? I mean, like for the
Well,
most part,
I think it exists. Well, I mean, I think some people may disagree, but
well, okay, let's think about it like this. Like if we're saying that the universe started with the Big Bang, right?
yes.
And this is kind of along the lines of determinism, but from that initial reaction, all the possible or there's only one possible chain of events, right, for the rest of time. And it was all determined by the variables in the initial reaction, right? But then along comes consciousness, which we're saying in this hypothetical is not predetermined,
Well, yeah, and we should also talk about fine tuning.
which
How
is
how the universe has has laws that allow humans, or not just humans, but consciousness to exist, right? We live in a universe where life, consciousness, and thinking as conscious beings are possible.
right, right, yeah. Which and so if we're saying that consciousness and life is not determined, it has the ability to, change itself or be random or whatever, then that is the one and only factor for change in the universe, right? Which then would play into the idea that consciousness plays a role in fulfilling or not fulfilling the purpose of the universe, the purpose for everything, right? So then, does that mean we have sort of an obligation or a like a pressure to try and see that out, or should we just keep living how we're living? How would that affect us? The social consequences of that idea.
Well, most people who are religious, or all people who are religious, believe that there are goals that they must achieve.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, and
That's
those
true.
goals are the, fundamental purposes of the universe in which they believe in.
Well, is it of the universe or is it just of life?
Well, for them, I believe it's the universe because it's they believe in a divine being that created the universe and life, and
Right.
and
And
those conscious beings made up by that divine being living in that universe made up by also that divine being has to fulfill such disciplines.
right to so they're it's like we said before, like they're the only things that can see it through.
Right.
Okay.
So I mean, in a way, they are kind of under pressure.
Sure.
Doesn't mean their lives are cursed, but you know.
Yeah. No, that is a good point. It's very similar to religion. But what about somebody who's not particularly religious? Or what about animals? What about other living things that aren't as intelligent?
So you know how we did an episode on the meaning of life for animals,
Yeah.
and for them, it seems like, based on how they live, it seems like their actions their meanings are only based on carrying out their existences. Yeah, right. Eating, sleeping, reproducing, and so on.
Sure. So, oh, I mean, we're
Well,
not too different, are we?
see, in a way, they don't have a set of disciplines that they have to follow, but within their genes, they're pressured to do something. So they're pressured to go out and hunt. They're pressured to go out and reproduce, right? So, I mean, they're not coming that, or they're not following those disciplines from a textbook, but
But-
they do have that sort of
Right. It's a
pressure.
shared pressure.
Yeah.
I mean, all living things feel that pressure, right? To get food, water, and
Even
shelter.
us, right?
Yeah. So could that be the pressure of the universe?
Or the purpose.
Right. But then, if that is the case, then things aren't just up to us. It's like we're getting help, right?
Mm-hmm.
Would you still consider it possible or I guess plausible for us to fail the purpose of the universe, even if the universe was putting those pressures on us, even if it was nudging us in the right direction? Because that changes things, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm.
because now it's something outside of ourselves, sort of changing things, right? It's not necessarily like this level of consciousness that's changing things. It's a higher level.
Interesting. Do you maybe want to talk about what happens if we fail the purpose?
Okay, sure. I mean, this is
And what does it mean?
extreme. I mean, I really don't know, and it depends on a lot of things. It could be a whole number of things, right?
Well,
Well, see, like let's take like Christianity for example, and the purpose that they see.
if you fail your purpose, not just Christianity, a lot of big religions believe that, you know, it's very simple. You do good things, you get rewarded. You do bad things, you get punished.
Yeah,
And those bad things come from failing the disciplines, the purpose.
right. But it's not like there's ever a universal end, right?
What do you mean?
Like, yeah, people individually are meeting their end. They're dying, right? And they have their judgment days. But does the universe have a judgment day? Like at the end of time, is there like this sort of like reckoning where everything gets, it's decided upon whether the universe did good or not?
And how would it know like when it failed?
Yeah, I mean it's not it's not like it's not like a really like easy thing to think about.
Right.
It's
Do you personally think it's more plausible to live in a universe with no purpose at all,
yeah,
or the purpose where that with a purpose but with no like, you know, conscious actions. So existing, like maybe that's the purpose, but you don't have to do anything. You don't have to take any conscious actions.
well, here's the thing.
So it has to happen.
If we examine our own lives, right, it's pretty easy to feel like there's no purpose for why we're here, right? Like we have nothing to strive for, like intrinsically, right? And so if we but then again, we sort of each on our own find a purpose, right? It's I mean it's not a single purpose is not intrinsically put into us, but our need to find one is, right? Which is interesting. And so if we take that out to a universal level, and we say like things are similar, it's not like there's a single defined purpose that the universe is going for, but maybe it's trying to find it. Maybe it's trying to, reason its way through things and, discover the thing that it's meant to be or to do.
So are you saying it's more in the journey?
I'm saying that's a possibility.
Oh.
Because there's also the possibility, like, if we're going back to the individual, like, some individuals do believe that there is a purpose. It's not, like religious individuals, like, they have a purpose, for sure.
Well, not just religious people, but I do think it sounds, or at least my intuition tells me that it's kind of ridiculous that there is a universe and life with no purpose at all. I mean, that does sound kind of ridiculous.
Well, why do you think that?
Well, because I think, oh, seems like seems like everything does or exists for some sort of reason.
Why?
Just what my intuition tells me.
Okay. Why is what's the reason for a rock? Just a random rock in a field. What's the purpose of that rock?
I don't think it's the purpose, but you can explain how it came to be.
Sure, you can explain how it came to be, but what we're talking about right now is how everything has a purpose, right? Or at
Yeah.
least that's what you're saying. So what is the purpose of that rock?
I don't think you can say there's a purpose for that rock in that place and that specific time frame, but I do think you can come up with why that matter exists.
Okay. But that's pretty much just the same question
Because
of
if
why.
you were to ask, like, why is that rock on that street, you know, like in that specific time frame, I don't think the question of why there is appropriate. It's more of like how it came to be.
But what we're asking right now is the question of why.
Well, I'm
We're,
saying that doesn't exist. It's not a right question. It's like asking,
okay, then how are you able to ask the question of why or what the universe's purpose is?
oh, it's an assumption, obviously.
Okay.
I'm not saying there's a purpose, but
But why do you but you're
oh,
saying
why do I think there is? My intuition tells me that.
right. Yeah.
I think in a way that, well, sometimes I do think, like, well, this question is very similar to like, why is there something rather than nothing?
Yep.
Now, obviously, I'm not even close to answering that question. I really don't know.
See, well, it is a little similar to that question, but there's also a difference, because, well, okay, think about your life as a human. You know, almost everything that you interact with has a purpose, right? Like these microphones, their purpose is to record us, right? This computer is to help us do work, do a million other things like phones, whatever. Most of the things in our life are there for a purpose, right? But that's because we made them, right? We made them to serve a purpose, and they're just carrying out that purpose, right? When we use them. But things in the universe aren't really like that. Things outside of us that we didn't create aren't like that, are they? I mean, they could be. They could have a purpose that like some higher being made them for, but at least
No,
to
I think
us.
it's very similar to the rock analogy you just came with. It just happens to be because of some previous natural phenomenon.
Which means it doesn't really have a purpose. It just has a reason for existing, or an explanation. You know, it's not like it's meant to carry out something. It's meant to do something.
Interesting.
You know,
Yeah, I think so too.
so
It's just
I mean, then it means like
so. Then, can you say that's like? Can you say the same thing for the universe itself or for life? They just happen to be instead of they're carrying out this special existence.
well, right. That's what I was getting at. Like instead of just believing like, oh yeah, I mean everything should have a purpose. I mean that's a very human way to think about things. And when you try to get outside of that and think in broader terms or broader contexts, it's not really all like that. So yeah, that's sort of my reasoning for believing that there is no one true universal purpose that everything is sort of looking for or carrying out collectively,
Yeah.
you know. And then it just comes down to the individual where you have to find your purpose, and I guess that's limited to only conscious things who can think about their purpose. So, humans. But who knows? I mean, animals might be able to do that.
Hmm.
I mean, I think it's completely possible that a lot of smart animals are asking why they're in the situations they're in, which isn't too far off from why am I here at all?
Yeah.
You know, like, I mean, if we're just talking about instincts or whatever, when something bad happens to you, or when you're put in a tough spot, a lot of people, their first reaction is like, why is this happening to me? You know, it's an instinct. You know, it's a natural reaction. So I feel like it's likely that a lot of animals would do the same, you know, because they have emotions, right? You know, they feel sadness, they feel pain, and so when they feel those emotions, and you know those negative emotions or even positive emotions, like you know maybe they could feel gratitude or whatever. It's you know it's like they would probably think about those emotions or think about what's causing them to have those emotions, you know, how their situation is affecting them and why it's there at all. You know, I mean, I feel like that's not too impossible, right? I mean, it's easy to think that animals are so so far below us, and part of that is because they actually are. But I think a lot of the times it's exaggerated. You know, I mean, what do you think? Do you think that animals could be feeling those things? You know, questioning those things?
I think we talked about this in the Meaning of Life for Animals episode,
Yeah,
but
we did.
I do think like what you said, like they could be, they might have the ability to be self-aware, like where they are, oh where am I or who am I, but I
Yeah.
don't think for now like they can't question like why there's anything at all or certain things like that. And even if they did come up with those questions, I think the approaching part would be, a little more difficult for them.
So you don't think that any other species besides humans have asked the question of why am I here?
No, I think a why am I here?
Yeah,
I think it's possible.
you think it's possible?
Yeah.
Okay, so then humans aren't the only thing that can, you know, find a purpose, find an individual purpose, right? That's theoretically extended to all life, to anything they can think, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think that's a pretty interesting thing, you know, and it's. I mean, I don't know. Maybe. See, it's sort of weird because anything could sort of fit into the idea of the universe fulfilling itself or its purpose, right? Because if it doesn't have a purpose that it forces upon us or you know sort of pushes us in the direction of, and it just basically says figure it out, you know, then you could say, well, the purpose is for life to find its purpose, you know, like it could literally, I mean, that's pretty much similar to carrying out its existence because, I mean, life sort of needs to find a purpose or needs to
Interesting,
find
because
something.
all right, so the whole process of finding truth and finding the meaning, the purpose, let's say that is the ultimate purpose, okay?
Yeah.
So what happens if we find it, fulfill the purpose of the universe?
Right.
And I think we talked about this in the Life After Truth episode. Remember?
Yeah.
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 Well, but that could be, I mean, sure, I mean, it could be anything. It doesn't have to be finding truth. Like, what happens if we achieve the purpose of the universe? does it just go away because it has been achieved?
Hmm.
And what is it for?
Hmm.
So to me, although my intuition tells me that everything has to exist for some reason, it does seem a little complicated for the universe to be, or for the universe to expect something to happen.
Hmm. Yeah.
Because there are way more variabilities. Like, what if it fails?
Well, it could be something general, you
Yeah.
know.
Or
Or
what if
or
it does
or
happen, like I said?
it could just be like the like the carrying out one activity or something like. I mean, if it is, we're probably nowhere near to it. But let's say like there's a hyper intelligent alien species or whatever that is getting close, and it's something that we can never imagine right now. But in their position, they know that like that's the reason for the universe being here. It's to do that thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
That would be interesting. But it's not. It's sort of like this one idea, right? This one action. It's not, like a collective thing, like taking into account everything in the universe. It's just anything anywhere could achieve the full purpose of the universe.
Mm-hmm.
Sounds a little far fetched.
So that makes me think about what are some things that will be fulfilled without us even trying. So there's existing. That has to happen.
Yeah,
What else?
destruction, existence, and death are guaranteed,
Right.
or at least change, like entropy,
Yeah.
stuff like that.
So those things are inevitable.
Yeah. And this is another thing where you could say, oh well, that's sort of the way of the universe pressuring us to do stuff, given those constraints. Like those constraints are pushing us in the right direction, or you could just say that it's not. That it's separate. It's just how things are, and you gotta work within that to find the purpose, but it's not necessarily pushing you towards the purpose.
Hmm.
So it's a hard thing to think about
Right.
because you could justify it in both ways. But if we're talking about, achieving or failing the purpose and what happens afterwards, I, I, I mean, was your first idea like, oh, well, then everything would just end? Like purpose fulfilled, don't need it anymore, it'll go away. Was that your first idea when you thought about what happens after achieving the purpose? Or was it something different? Because it was my first idea. I was like, well, what happens after? I don't know. Probably everything will go away because once something served its purpose, it's no longer needed.
So then what was it for?
Just that purpose, and that's it. Right. But if we think about our world, like if I wanted to text somebody, you know, like, or let's say I was like on my deathbed, okay, and in my final moments, I wanted to like call a loved one or whatever. My phone would be the thing that is serving that purpose for me. Right? It's helping me do that. That's its purpose. And so once it's done, once I end the call and I die, I can no longer use the phone, right? But it still exists in that world, although it doesn't have a purpose, right? It's still going to be there. And then maybe we could say that, well, it'll be repurposed, whether it's like it'll go to somebody else or like literally the materials will be turned into something else or just like put into the ground or whatever. It's going to be somewhere and do something else, as long as it exists. So that could maybe mean that if we're talking about the universe now, once we complete the purpose, we'll have a new one. We'll get a new one that we have to carry out, and maybe that one won't involve life or consciousness. Maybe it'll involve something different, something as complex or even more complex, but different. Something that we can't really imagine.
That's incredibly interesting.
Yeah, it could just be a chain of achieving, right? That goes on for forever.
Do you maybe want to talk about where the purpose was
Decided?
originated? Yeah.
Sure.
Or do you think it's similar to the laws of nature? I mean, it has to be. It has to come from the same source if it does exist.
Well, why do you say that?
Well, it's the universe. It's
But what if multiple things can decide on the how the universe exists? Like let's say there's
okay. So like polytheism,
sure, yeah,
like different gods or different deities
yeah,
governing different parts of nature.
sure.
Interesting.
Like one thing was in charge of the purpose, and the other thing was in charge of the laws, and the other thing was in charge of what's in it. Like life or whatever.
Yeah. But I mean, I do think it's more. To me, it just sounds more plausible if there were fundamental laws of nature that cause other things to exist and so on.
That is
So
true.
it starts
because-
from the most fundamental logic, and it grows from there. And it generates different laws of physics than chemistry than biology.
Well,
and
what do you
so
mean
on.
by the most fundamental logic?
Well, it's like the theory of everything. It's like where everything came from.
So was that like decided upon or created, or was that just self-existent? Because if it was self-existent, or I guess in either case, it's sort of like that's a deterministic sort of thing, right? So-
Self-existent. So when you say self-existent, it means the universe doesn't even have a choice. It doesn't. It has to exist because of its definition.
Sure. Yeah. And its definition goes down to that theory of everything, like that fundamental law, And if that wasn't decided upon, like if that was self-existent, then, everything really is just predetermined, right?
Right.
But if it was decided upon, then there would have had to been other choices, other theories of everything, and maybe those are different universes.
Different purposes for different universes.
Sure,
Okay.
but well, I don't know about purposes because I mean, even if there's a universe with a different fundamental law, it's still going to be predetermined, right? It's just based on that law. So purpose, I don't know. can anything that is governed by a fundamental, can any universe that's governed by a fundamental law not be predetermined? It's kind of like, well, the only thing that could change that is if consciousness is not doesn't follow that rule, which is sort of contradictory, right?
Okay, so just for the audience, I'm going to clarify. So when you mean predetermined, I mean because the most fundamental laws of nature govern everything else. As the fundamental laws start to exist, the purpose of the universe always or also comes from those laws.
Sure, or it's not really like it has a purpose. It's just it's like we said, it's carrying out its existence.
Okay.
Yeah. You know, it doesn't really make sense for it to not carry out its purpose or to have the ability to achieve or fail its purpose if there is a single law that governs everything, you know. But I don't know, maybe we're just not imagining it in the right way. Maybe it could be a law that allows for randomness or allows for the like unpredictability of consciousness. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
You know, but
Yeah,
like,
because if everything were to be predetermined, or you're trying to talk about a universe in which the purpose isn't predetermined, and if the concept of consciousness is based on predictability, so it can, it has free
Change
will
things.
and all that. Yeah,
Right.
then it wouldn't have been predetermined.
right.
Yeah. Okay.
But is that possible still under a fundamental theory, you know? Because I mean, that theory has to be able to explain everything. Can something that must be able to explain everything also say that some things are unexplainable? And does that count as it explaining everything? Right? Because if it allows for consciousness, which is something that is unpredictable, right? Or at least in the sense of how we're thinking about it, is unpredictable. It sort of goes against its purpose of being the law that everything must follow, the law that explains everything, right? So it's sort of, it's contradictory. So is that even possible?
I'm gonna have to think about that one.
That's an interesting idea. So then what if it's not governed, what if we're not governed by a single law?
The ultimate purpose. So no purpose at all.
Or what if we have multiple?
Like, are you talking about multiple purposes or multiple laws of nature?
Well, both. Like, let's say, well, because if you have one law, then there's really only one way that things can go, right? And if we're saying that it consciousness can be sort of calculated by that law, it can be explained fully by that law. It's not unpredictable. It's not random. If we're saying that, then yeah, everything has to just follow the path, right? But what if we had multiple laws? Okay, so it's not one thing that is at play. It's multiple things that are sort of vying for power over the universe. Then it's possible to have multiple purposes, right?
Right.
And you know, the sort of pressure I guess we'd feel would be, well, it might not even be conflicting. It might be just separate. You know what I mean? Like these laws might not be competing with each other. They might just be very different. And so we feel pressures from each of them pushing us in different directions that aren't necessarily opposite. So maybe we can achieve more than one, you know?
Well, my question is, how do the laws of nature generate the purpose, the ultimate purpose? And do you think that's
And
similar to how the question of are social laws derived from natural laws? Is it purely a reductionistic process, or are the laws of nature based on the purpose? So is it the purpose, then the laws of nature follow that purpose, or is it the laws of nature generate the purpose? Or is there no purpose at all?
so, like, so you're saying, you know, what we've been talking about for the past few minutes is like if there is a single theory, then there's also a single purpose, right?
Mm-hmm.
But which one causes the other? See, I was sort of thinking about it as the theory was existing before the purpose, or I guess like, I mean they're connected. So you
So logic first, then the
or
purpose
or at
comes with.
least or at least the purpose is explained by the theory.
Okay.
That's
So
what
if we
that's what I
come up
mean
with
by
the so
before.
so if we come up with the theory of everything,
Yeah,
where all the fundamental laws of nature originated from,
yeah.
that theory itself allows us to interpret its meaning, and perhaps finds allows us to find the purpose.
hmm
Mm.
But you're asking the question of what if the purpose existed, what if the purpose is the reason for the theory's existence? The purpose was first, and the theory just played into that purpose. It was the way to make the universe achieve that purpose. Which, now that I'm like saying it and thinking about it, it kind of sounds not that far off, or not that much more unlikely than the other way around, where the theory is before, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's a good question. Yeah. Yeah. This you know, being able to achieve or fail the purpose, it's, I mean, we don't feel, like I said, we don't feel the pressure, but we could, and we just don't really understand it like that, like our drive to live or whatever, or even just desires, maybe interests, even like things forcing, you know, us down certain life paths, or careers or whatever, that could be a pressure from the universe to go towards the purpose, you know.
Mm.
But either way, it doesn't really change how we are going to live our lives.
I think if there were to be a purpose, I don't think it's. Do you think it's anything, quote, like ultimate? Like finding the meaning of life, finding the theory of everything? Because that's not what the general population did. I mean, I don't think billions of people that existed before us, before the scientific revolution, before everything, before the questioning process,
Yeah.
just live their lives, or unsuccessfully live their lives universally.
Well, how do you determine what's unsuccessful? Because
So
for
I'm
all we
saying,
know,
so I'm yeah,
well, I understand what you're saying. Like, yeah, they didn't spend their lives trying to achieve that purpose, or they
exactly.
never got to that purpose. But what if like that was just those people were the building blocks, the setup to allow the future people to someday get to that purpose? Then they were crucial to achieving that purpose,
I
right?
think
And
that
so they
sounds more
did
plausible.
fulfill
Yes,
that
I
purpose.
agree. I think that sounds more plausible because, like I said, like for the meaning of life for animals episode,
Yeah.
right? Like if the meaning of life is, if meaning of life, all life is to question the universe, all animals are just, I mean, they're not fulfilling that ultimate purpose.
Right.
And it sounds more reasonable, at least to me, that that's not the purpose. It's not something quote unquote ultimate.
Hmm.
It's something that's fundamental in one's existence,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So yeah, I agree.
So if we knew the purpose, right, or we sort of found out that there was something that we all are striving for, do you think that that would affect how we live? And if so, how?
If there is a purpose,
Right, and if we knew about it.
I think religions explain that very well.
That's true. That's a little look into how we would change.
That's how we would react.
Yeah. I don't know, it's a little scary, because like you just blindly sort of follow that purpose. But I guess there is still, it's not there's people who are Christians who haven't always acted in holy sort of ways, right?
Mm-hmm.
They've strayed from the path. But doesn't it feel a little bit constricting to think that there is only one thing that we should be doing?
One book that's governing every single life for humans.
Right. Don't you want more freedom than that?
Maybe that freedom is not good.
That's a very good point. I mean, humans, I think all life probably seeks freedom, seeks the ability to choose or to do what they want, right? But what happens when you're given too much freedom? Is there too much freedom?
I think so, yes.
Explain.
Well, I think whether you, like, even if you disagree with the fundamental principles of major religions, you have to agree that those major religions played a crucial role in developing social order in some way. Maybe you don't like those rules, maybe you don't like what those laws are,
Yeah,
but they did play a very, very significant role in shaping communities
right.
and social orders.
That's true.
Well, don't you think too much freedom might cause anarchy?
Hmm.
Or, well, I think we need to talk about religion in a different episode, but you have to agree that the idea of believing that there's this divine being watching you all the time is a very, very powerful tool. It allows you to watch yourself. So it allows individuals
Hmm.
to be guardians of themselves. It makes you think that there is some divine being watching you.
Yeah.
So you have to discipline. It allows one to discipline oneself. And it does that for everyone.
But it's not self-discipline. You're being pressured by something bigger than yourself.
Exactly.
So it's not.
So that's a
really.
powerful tool when it comes to creating social order.
Well, sure. Yeah. No. Okay. So yes, social order is important because if we didn't have any laws, it would be chaos. It would be anarchy. Sure, but if we sort of just look at the individual rather than society, having the ability to do whatever you want, whenever you want to, that can also be suffocating. The burden of those options can be suffocating, and also the sort of unpredictability of everything can be suffocating.
Hmm.
So it seems like there's a happy medium. Have you finished Crime and Punishment?
Not yet.
Not yet. Do you mind if I spoil?
I don't mind.
Okay. So audio or any listeners, if you don't want to, hear the ending of Crime and Punishment, maybe skip this part. But so in the book, the main character Raskolnikov, he sees himself as a god, right, or
Superman.
Superman, right. He's above everybody else, and he has the freedom to
To
do
punish others and
right,
the Superman.
be the one
Yeah.
keeping the social order, right.
Right.
He believes he's smart enough to do that. He has the ability. But Dostoevsky writes how that can corrupt your soul. If you have to act sort of for everybody else, you have to try to influence them, you lose yourself. It's not something that one human can do, right? Just because of our nature, we have to be able to, look at ourselves as individuals. We have to, have our own personalities and whatever, right? Because that's part of our purpose. That's part of how we live. It's part of our existence. So that sort of, it brings to light how much of a burden freedom can be. But that's not necessarily the same as what we're talking about, because in our in our free world, you don't even have to care about social order. You don't have to care about, you know, making things as good as possible for other people. You can just do what you want. You don't really have the burden of taking care of anything, or at least besides yourself, if you choose. So it's different. But do you think it would still be too much for us to handle?
What do you think?
I think so. I mean, humans sort of limit themselves naturally. I mean, well, it's one of our like biggest strengths as well as our biggest weaknesses. So let's just take like working out for example. Like when you're working out, like doing cardio or pushing weights, your mind is constantly telling you like, this sucks, this hurts, I should stop this, right? It's holding you back, just naturally, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it kind of and that's for your health and safety, because if you expend too much energy, well, number one, you could die, but number two, like if it's not as severe, you won't be able to protect yourself as well in the future. Like there's reasons for it, right? It's been determined by evolution. So does that sort of mean that, like does that natural barrier sort of mean that humans need barriers of some sort to exist, or to exist well, to fulfill their purpose, so to speak, you know.
Well, the purpose there, I don't think it has to do with like the universal purpose. It has to do with purpose as in like for social order.
Well, but now we're talking about.
It's not the ultimate purpose that we were discussing.
Well, yeah, but we're not even discussing social order anymore. We're just talking, like it's there's no rules. There's no rules nowhere. You don't have to care about anything. You have all the freedom.
Yeah.
Social order isn't really a concern, if you don't choose for it to be, right? Then is there still the 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 intrinsic need for barriers, for sort of limits and discipline?
Yes.
Yes?
Yes.
Why do you say that?
I know I'm keep repeating the same thing over and over, but religions.
Okay, what do you think religions say?
I think in a way that I do agree that we have some sort of intuition to create some sort of laws for ourselves, restrict ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
And although like there's no any you can do anything as long as you don't break the laws of physics. Yet we have many rules in our society, and it doesn't matter if you believe in absolute morality or religion. I think those laws and our act of constricting ourselves is more focused on making a better community, making a better society. So, yes,
So you think humans need community, right?
and
Or they want
the
community.
laws and the restricting part.
Well, which comes first? The want for community, or the need or want for community, or the laws that keep the community in order? It's the want, it's the need, right? We're social creatures.
Mm-hmm.
We need that interaction, we need that camaraderie. But in order to keep that, we also need laws, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, I mean, yeah, humans, in that sense, humans do need order, some sort of order, which means that all that freedom, as much freedom as you can get is a bad thing.
Yeah, because it has to do with survival. I mean, if you don't live in a good society, if you don't live in a structured society with people following certain set of rules, you're going to be in danger.
Right.
So I think that the instinct or whatever to constrict ourselves is necessary.
Interesting.
And I think it's, well, whether if you think it's fundamental or not, I do think it's at least a good thing.
Mm-hmm. So it sounds like there's a healthy balance between freedom and limitations.
Yeah.
So how do we get to the optimal level? Is it different for different things? Like we can be constricted in how we interact with each other. Like there's certain things that you shouldn't do to other people because it will upset the social order. But what about things like animals? Like how do we set the balance for that? It's interesting. I mean, I guess that's what we've been trying to do for centuries. With government and all that. But these social laws are, well, just thinking about how we've always sort of needed a community and needed rules within that community, and how it's grown over time. and how we've made changes when necessary and things have gotten better, like the quality of life has gotten better over time, does that make you think that eventually we will find the perfect balance between freedom and limitation? You know, just if given enough time, can we get there? Because, I mean, obviously that's the direction that we're headed in, right?
I don't think it will sustain itself.
What do you mean?
Well, how do you know if something's perfect?
Well, yeah, I guess
Perfect balance.
we wouldn't know, but just
But okay,
but
so even if there
eventually,
were to be, even if we were to be, or even if we were to achieve the perfect balance, and we don't know,
yeah.
it's not going to sustain forever.
Why not?
I think if you look at any history, it doesn't matter if it's, well, first, again, we don't know if it's perfect or not. But if the universe knows it's perfect and humans don't,
Hmm.
um, for now, I highly doubt it. I mean, I think it's a different question if we were to know that if it was the perfect balance,
Well,
right?
yes. No, okay. Let me say this before we move on to that. But I feel like we will get there.
And you think it will, do you think we're going to sustain?
Yes. I feel like it's really similar to like think about it like a dampened sign function in math. Okay. So it's like it's this wave, right? And it's going back and forth, but it's oscillating around a single line, right? And over time it's going to get closer and closer and closer like the
Converges.
right. The amount it varies from that line will get smaller and smaller and smaller, right? And so the limit as time gets or goes on will be pretty much at that line. And yeah, it's gonna be like constantly fine tuning itself, right? But at least the limit will be the exact value of that line. And so that's what I think society will do. Eventually, we're going to get to the point where we have found the pretty much optimal way for us to organize ourselves. But even in that situation, government doesn't go away, or at least the theory of that government, because it could be a system without government. You know, that might be the line. But the theory of how we govern ourselves, the theory that we follow, will always be there. You know, and if the line does require some governing, some authority, you know, we still it's we still sort of like need though we need people to decide things for us, right? Or to make judgment calls, right? Which is pretty interesting. It implies like there's a natural power structure within humanity. Or maybe power isn't really the way to think about it. Maybe it's just role, you know? Because I mean, yeah, in simple terms, the people in government have more power, right?
Yes.
But maybe we shouldn't really think of that as power. Maybe it's just that's just a job like any other, you know. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
Like, and that's sort of the way to get to that line. But I don't know. I don't know. But what was your so you were asking about what that line is? Was that it?
Well,
Or
I think
or
it's an
or
assumption. Well, you said that it will eventually converge to that line.
yeah.
Well, how do we know? Okay, so that line is the perfect balance.
Yeah.
How do you know that we're approaching perfectness
Well, it's like I
or perfection?
well I started this sort of idea with saying the quality of life over time has gotten better, right? Like things have gotten better for more people on average as time has gone on, and that's through very, very different systems of government, like a lot of different trying things out and, tweaking it. Maybe something collapses and we change it. Like it's a lot of change, but still things are getting better.
I think that's an assumption.
Well, obviously there's variance. Like it's gonna like we'll have some spots or some times where like maybe we'll enter a world war or something and things will get really bad.
Why do you think we're getting better?
Well, I mean, just think about how societies were before. Like you were able to, hurt people, kill people. People were living in poverty without food. People were starving. People, I mean, they still are, but it was a lot more common for people to
Yeah.
suffer back
Yeah.
then than it is now, right?
Well, don't you think that assumption itself in which where you say, "Oh, the society has gotten better," is based on the people living in that society, living in that era.
What do you mean?
So I'm saying like for us, I think we believe that the society has gotten better because we compare ourselves to the people from hundreds of years ago.
Yeah. But you're saying like if they saw what we are like,
Well, I think what I'm saying is I think it's subjective. And I don't think if we can. I don't know if we were to living, or I don't know if it's even possible to approach that line and eventually converge to that line. And who knows, maybe it could go out of track. And some people might say, oh, that's not the perfect line, that's the perfect line.
yeah,
Because,
that's a good point. Like the idea of the line is going to be different for everybody. But what I'm saying is that I'm not necessarily discounting that. Like people are going to have a disagreement over where the line is. But what I'm saying is that disagreement will eventually lead us towards the line. It's the average idea out of all of them. So, however much we sort of disagree now or in the future, like that disagreement and the eventual decisions that we make through that disagreement is going to push us towards the line. So individually, it's not going to be the same, but universally and with enough time, it will converge. Do you think that's possible? Or does that make sense?
yes, but I'm going to have to think about that one.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I mean, that is a good point, the subjectivity, because why is quality of life necessarily the measure? You know?
And what's it based upon? Is it the average? Or like on paper, if we have, like if the wealthy people start getting wealthier and if the poor people start, you know,
Yeah.
or, how do I explain this? I'm not just talking about wealth, but
Happiness.
happiness. And so if you calculate like the net happiness of the population,
Yeah.
it on paper it's going to say it increased, but I don't think that's necessarily a right way to measure like the optimal society.
Just are you saying just happiness isn't the right way?
Well, if
Or
have sure,
okay.
not just happiness. Okay, but you know what I mean? You can't just see the number on the paper and say the society has gotten better. Sometimes, but I don't think you can generalize.
That's a good point. Well, then if we're saying that, I still believe that we've pretty much advanced in all ways from societies back then. Like let's say another sort of variable in that equation is technology. Like, what's our technology like? Has it advanced? Or what are our capabilities? It's not just happiness. It's the tools that we've created, are what we've built, what we've done with it. And still, in that case, we're much better, right? And then we could just say knowledge, like how smart are we on average? Still, we're just better, right? So, I mean, if it's not just quality of life, if it's taking everything into account, I mean, I still feel like we're approaching the best possible way to live. But no, yeah, I still feel that way. Yeah. Do you agree?
Yes.
Yeah.
All right, let's go get lunch.
All right.